This started when I was invited to my cousin's house one summer day to hang out. I'll call her Kate. We had known each other most of our lives, and was one of the few family members outside of my immediate family I still talk to. Family fighting with other family members about money will usually tear people apart. When I arrived, she was there with her then boyfriend, whom I'll refer to as Andy. I didn't like him very much. He was what's called a one-upper. You did that? I did that blindfolded. You caught a fish that big? I caught a fish this big. He was really cocky about everything too, and just overall oozed douchebag frat boy energy, along with having the kind of laugh that just caused you to want to cut out his vocal cords. I couldn't stand the guy. And neither could most of mine and Kate's close friends. Well, anyways, I'm getting off topic. We spent the day running around the town doing various things until we ended up back at Kate's house for some beers, which we had bought before heading back. This was back when I still drank a little bit. After some time had passed, we got on the topic of my grandmother. It was here that I learned Kate and my grandmother had some issues that were never resolved before she passed away. I don't recall what they were, but Kate mentioned that she never got to reconcile with her and that she didn't even know where she was buried. Kate wasn't even allowed to go to the funeral due to the family problems I mentioned before. I know where she's buried. My mom and dad used to visit her grave at least once in a while. Haven't been there in years now, though. Her grave is in the cemetery by Thorn Street Park, I said. Can we go there tonight? Asked Kate in a slightly excited and hopeful tone. After the alcohol has left her system, of course. Kate was lenient with most things, but driving while having any alcohol in you whatsoever was something she absolutely would not budge on. I had no problem with that, because I was the same way. I was planning on stopping about 3 hours before I went home, leaving plenty of time for the alcohol to leave me before heading home. On top of that, I was nursing 2 cans of beer for like an hour and a half, so I wasn't anywhere near being drunk. Plus, being a guy that's over 6 foot and in decent shape, I wouldn't have to wait too long before I was ready to drive. It was maybe a little bit before midnight when we left Kate's house. Andy came along too, unfortunately. We brought flashlights with us so we could read the names on the tombstones, and we also made it a point to have someone watching the roads around the cemetery for car lights. The almost full moon was out enough for us to be able to walk around without having to worry about bumping into something and twisting an ankle. Plus, there were some trees there that blocked out the moonlight over some of the graves. I parked the truck across the street from the cemetery, thanking God that the gate hadn't been closed. It normally would be after a certain time. But apparently, it was our lucky night, and whosoever was supposed to do that didn't. We got out, and I led the way to the northeast side, which thankfully was closest to where I parked. After about 20 minutes of looking and crouching behind the headstones where cars had passed by just to be on the safe side, I found the grave. I don't remember anything about what Kate said, but she made peace with my grandmother. While this was going on, I kept looking around me and off deeper into the cemetery. I got this feeling that someone was there with us. Not the feeling of being watched, but that a fourth person was there with us. You know when you're on your computer facing away from the door to the room and you feel someone walk in? It felt like that. Several more minutes passed by, and then we decided to leave, but not before trying to locate the oldest tombstone in that section. I have no idea who won, but we made it back to the truck without issue. I pulled out of the parking lot and decided to go the long way around the cemetery before dropping off Kate and Andy and heading home. I got to the red light and made a right-hand turn which went between a preschool and the opposite side of the cemetery we had been on. After turning onto the street, I saw a figure standing under one of the far street lights that were on the right side of the road. The cemetery side. They were just standing there. I could tell they were just standing there because they didn't bob up and down like someone does when they walk. They were also facing the road with their arms at their sides. As I drove closer, I noticed that the person was wearing clothing that you would associate with an elderly person. I began to think that maybe someone had wandered away from an old folks' home, or maybe they could be a dementia patient that wandered off in the middle of the night. You guys seeing this? I asked, pointing to the person in the road with my hand still on the wheel. I looked over at Kate's face, and I knew she saw what I saw because her mouth was halfway open and her eyes wide, full of tears. I looked back at the figure, and for a split second, it looked almost exactly like my grandmother. The short white hair and the style that she always had was unmistakable. The clothes she had on were the same kind that she wore whenever I saw her. I didn't get a really good look at her face, but she at least looked somewhat similar to what she did in life. My hands, arms, even my chest suddenly began to shake uncontrollably as we passed by the figure. I didn't slow down. I don't think I even looked back in the rearview mirror. Kate was freaking out just as much as I was, while Andy was in the back looking for what had gotten into us. I just drove up to the closest parking lot, which was a few streets over across from a bar and a barber shop. I needed to stop the truck before I got into an accident, but I also wanted to put some distance between me and that place before I did. Andy claims he didn't see anything, but me and Kate both saw it, so we know it wasn't a hallucination or a trick of the light. I don't recall much about what was said while we sat there, but I remember the shaking and just looking forward. We must have sat there for at least 10 minutes while I tried to regain my composure. Once the shaking had subsided for the most part, I drove Kate and Andy back to their house, none of us saying much. I very rarely drive past that cemetery anymore, and I haven't been back to my grandmother's grave since that night. Who knows? I may go back one day and see what happens this time around. I do know one thing, though. In the meantime, if I ever find myself heading towards the cemetery at night again, I'll probably take the long way home. Hello everyone, I'm Giggles, and thank you so much for listening to my narration. A quick shout out to all my patrons: Melissa Perez, Geek Sanctuary, Lawrence Wallen, Andreas Anderson London, Eric Cifuentes, Krzysztof Kozak Slazak, Jesse Hartley, and Icy Narrates. If you want to become a patron today, you can check out the link in my description below. And as always, thank you so much for your support. I'll see you in the next video.